What is going on in my house? I screamed with all the strength my lungs could muster. My heart was pounding so hard, I felt like it would burst right out of my chest. Right in front of me, kneeling by the front door of my own home, were my son, Robert, and my daughter-in-law, Patty, with tools in their hands, trying to break the lock. A massive moving truck was parked right outside my front lawn, its back door open and some of my furniture already loaded inside. "Mom, you weren't supposed to be traveling for 2 weeks." Robert went completely pale, as if he had just seen a ghost. The tools fell from his hands with a metallic clatter that echoed in the afternoon silence. "Mother-in-law, we just wanted to—" Patty stammered, her eyes darting nervously between the truck and me, desperately searching for some believable excuse. But let me tell you how I got to this moment. Let me tell you how a simple change of plans became the most painful revelation of my life. My name is Rosemary Baker. I am 67 years old, and I have been a widow for 5 years. My husband, Richard, was the love of my life for 42 years of marriage. When he passed away, I thought I would never again feel that kind of deep, soul-crushing pain. I was wrong, because the pain I felt that afternoon, watching my only son try to rob me, was different. It was a betrayal that cut deeper than anything else. That morning had started like any other. I woke up early, at 6 o'clock as always, made my coffee, and checked my suitcase for the 3rd time. I had been planning this trip for months. My younger sister, who lives in Seattle, Washington, had insisted I come visit. "Rosemary, you need to get out of that house. You need a distraction, something different," she would tell me over the phone every week. And she was right. Since Richard died, I had barely left this house that we built together, where we raised Robert, where we celebrated birthdays and Christmases, where we lived a whole life. Every corner held a memory, every room told a story. The cab arrived promptly at 8 o'clock in the morning. I took one last look at my home, locked the door, and put the set of keys in my purse. Robert knew I was leaving. I had told him about the trip 2 weeks ago. He had even come to visit the day before to say goodbye and wish me a safe journey. Now I understand that visit had a completely different purpose. The airport in Newark, New Jersey was crowded as usual. I checked in, went through security, and sat in the waiting area with my favorite book. My flight was scheduled to leave at 11 o'clock in the morning. But at 10:30, a voice announced over the loudspeakers that our flight had been cancelled due to technical issues with the aircraft. They offered to rebook us for the next day, but something inside me just said, "Go back home." I can't explain exactly what it was. Maybe a mother's intuition. Maybe the instinct of a woman who has lived long enough to feel when something is not right. But I decided not to wait. I grabbed my suitcase, left the airport, and called another cab to take me back home. The ride back took 40 minutes. I looked out the window, watching the familiar streets of my town pass by, thinking that maybe I could try to take the flight the next day. Or maybe it was a sign that I shouldn't travel at all. Richard always said I was too superstitious, but he also believed in signs of destiny. When the cab turned onto my street, something immediately caught my attention. There was a large truck parked right outside my house. It was one of those moving trucks that you rent by the day. My first reaction was to think that maybe a neighbor was moving, but as I got closer, my stomach twisted. The truck was parked exactly in front of my driveway, and the back door was open. I paid the cab driver and got out of the car with my suitcase, feeling like every step weighed more heavily. My legs were trembling slightly. Something was terribly wrong. I could feel it in every fiber of my being. I walked slowly up the entrance path. And that's when I saw them. My son Robert, my only son, the child I raised, who I fed, who I hugged when he had nightmares, was kneeling at my door with a tool in his hand. And next to him, his wife Patty, holding a screwdriver, both completely focused on breaking the lock on my house. For a second, my mind couldn't process what I was seeing. I just stood there, paralyzed, observing a scene that looked straight out of a nightmare. Behind them, inside the truck, I could see some of my furniture. I recognized my antique side table, the one I had inherited from my mother. I recognized the dining room chairs that Richard and I bought on our 10th anniversary. It was then that I screamed, "What are you doing in my house?" Robert dropped the tools and stood up so fast he almost lost his balance. His face went from shock to panic in a matter of seconds. Patty stood frozen, the screwdriver still in her hand, her mouth opening and closing without making a sound. "Mom, you weren't supposed to be traveling for 2 weeks," Robert stammered, and I could see the sweat forming on his forehead even though it wasn't hot out. "My flight was cancelled," I said, my voice shaking from a mixture of shock, disbelief, and a rage that was starting to boil inside me. "But that doesn't answer my question. What the heck are you doing trying to break into my house?" "Mother-in-law, we just wanted to—" Patty tried to speak, but the words got stuck in her throat. "You just wanted what?" My voice went up an octave. "You just wanted to break in and rob me? You just wanted to take my things while I was gone?" I looked toward the truck again, more closely this time. It wasn't just my furniture. I could see boxes, bags, objects wrapped in blankets. How long had they been planning this? How long had they been waiting for me to leave to empty my house? "It's not what you think, Mum." Robert finally found his voice, although it sounded weak, pathetic. "We can explain it." "Then explain it," I said, crossing my arms over my chest, trying to control the trembling that ran through my entire body. "Explain to me why my own son is trying to force his way into my house. Explain to me why there's a moving truck full of my belongings. Explain to me why I feel like my heart is breaking into 1,000 pieces right this instant." Robert looked at Patty, and in that exchange of glances, I could see everything I needed to know. They had planned this. It wasn't an impulse. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate, calculated plan, waiting for the perfect moment to execute it. "Mum, let me explain." Robert took a step toward me, but I instinctively backed away. That gesture, that small movement of rejection, seemed to hurt him more than any word. "Things have been tough for us lately." "Tough?" I repeated, my voice filled with disbelief. "And that gives you the right to steal from me?" "We're not stealing from you." Patty finally found her voice, though it sounded defensive, almost aggressive. "We're family. We thought you could help us." "Help you?" I let out a bitter laugh that I didn't even recognize as my own. "Help you by emptying my house while I'm gone? Without even asking me? Without my permission?" I walked toward the truck. I needed to see with my own eyes what else they had taken. With every step I took toward that vehicle, I felt like I was walking toward my own execution. I climbed up the back ramp and began to inspect the contents. My heart sank further with every object I recognized. There was the porcelain set that Richard gave me for our 25th anniversary. The antique lamps we bought together at that flea market 30 years ago. The paintings that hung in the living room, including the one my mother painted before she died. Books, decorations, even the old radio that belonged to my father. "How much?" I asked without turning to look at them, my voice barely a whisper. "How much did you expect to get by selling my entire life?" "Mom, please." Robert's voice sounded broken behind me. I turned around to face them, and the tears I had been holding back began to stream down my cheeks. "I have a very simple question, Robert. Just one question. And I want the truth. Is this the first time?" The silence that followed was deafening. Robert couldn't look me in the eyes. Patty was biting her lower lip, staring intently at the ground. "Answer me," I demanded, my voice trembling. "Is this the first time you've come into my house without my permission?" "We—" Patty began, but Robert interrupted her. "No," he finally admitted, and with that single word, I felt as if the air had been knocked out of my lungs. "We've come before. When you went to the grocery store, when you visited Florence, when you went to your doctor's appointments." I leaned against the side of the truck. I needed something to support me because my legs threatened to give way. "How many times?" "I don't know, Mum. Several times in the last 3 months." 3 months. For 3 months, I had been living in my house, feeling safe, feeling at home, while my own son came and went like a thief. All those times I felt like something was out of place. All those moments when I thought I was becoming forgetful, imagining that I had left an object in a different place. It hadn't been my imagination. It had been real. "What have you taken?" I asked, although I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. "Before today, what other things did you take?" Patty and Robert exchanged another glance, that silent communication of couples with shared secrets. "Small things," Patty murmured. "Things we thought you wouldn't notice right away." "Like what?" I insisted, feeling the rage bubbling up in my chest again. "Some jewelry," Robert admitted in a barely audible voice. "Some silver candlesticks. Some antique books we thought would have value." Every word was like a direct punch to my heart. "My mother's jewelry," I whispered. "The pearl earrings she left me before she died. The necklace she wore at her wedding. I thought I had lost them. I searched the whole house for weeks." "We needed them, Mum." Robert tried to justify himself. "We had debts. We had to pay." "Then you should have asked me for help," I exploded, my voice echoing down the street. "I am your mother, Robert. If you needed money, if you were in trouble, you could have told me. But instead, you decided to rob me. You decided to betray my trust in the worst possible way." "We knew you didn't have much money," Patty intervened, her voice taking on a defensive tone again. "You always say your pension barely covers things, that you have to watch every dollar." "And that gives you the right to decide for me?" I shouted. "That gives you the right to break into my house like thieves and take whatever you want." I got off the truck and walked toward the door of my house. I needed to go inside. I needed to see what else had been violated, what else had been touched by hands I thought loved me. I took out my keys with trembling hands and opened the door. The inside of my house looked normal at first glance, but when you look closely, when you know every corner of your home, you can see the absences. I could see the empty spaces where my things used to be. The shelf where I kept my grandmother's collection of crystal figurines was empty. The cabinet where Richard kept his collection of antique watches had its doors open and the shelves bare. I walked toward my bedroom as if in a trance. Robert and Patty followed me at a distance, not daring to get too close. I opened the drawer of my dresser, the drawer where I kept my most precious treasures. It was practically empty. "The locket," I said, my voice sounding hollow, dead. "The gold locket that Richard gave me for our last anniversary together. It has pictures of the two of us, from when we were young. Where is it?" Silence. "Where is it?" I shouted, turning toward them with a fury I had never felt before. "We sold it," Patty admitted in a low voice. 2 weeks ago. We needed to pay the rent, or we were going to be evicted." I felt as if my heart had been ripped from my chest. That locket was the most precious thing I owned. It was Richard's last gift, the last physical piece of our love that I could hold in my hands. And they had sold it. They had sold it as if it were any worthless, unimportant object. "How much?" I asked, my voice shaking with contained rage. "How much did you get for it?" $200, Robert whispered. $200. They had sold 42 years of marriage, of memories, of love, for $200 miserable dollars. I sat down on the edge of my bed, because if I didn't, I knew I would completely collapse. The tears were falling freely now, and I wasn't trying to stop them. Robert approached, tried to put his hand on my shoulder, but I pushed him away violently. "Don't touch me," I said in an icy voice. "Don't you dare touch me." "Mum, I'm so sorry," Robert sobbed. "We didn't want it to come to this. We thought if you were gone for 2 weeks, we could take enough things to solve our problems, and you would never have to find out." "And then what?" I asked, looking him directly in the eyes. "Then what, Robert? When I came back from my trip and noticed my house was empty, what were you going to tell me? That there was a robbery? Were you going to lie to my face while I mourned the loss of everything I loved?" He didn't answer, because there was no answer that could justify what they had done. "Who else did you sell my things to?" I continued. I needed to know everything. I needed to know the complete magnitude of this betrayal. "Where is my mother's jewelry? Richard's watches? My grandmother's crystal collection?" "There's a pawn shop on 7th Street, Patty spoke, her voice small. "We took most of the things there. Some we sold online, in those buy and sell groups." "And the money?" I asked. "What did you spend the money on that you got from selling my memories?" "We had debts," Robert began to explain. "The credit card was maxed out. We owed 3 months' rent. The car was about to be repossessed. We had collectors calling us every day, threatening to sue us." "And you never thought to ask me for help?" I repeated, feeling how disbelief mixed with pain. "It never occurred to you to come to me, your mother, and tell me the truth?" Robert ran his hands over his face, and I could see that he was crying too. But his tears didn't move me like before. I could no longer feel compassion for someone who had violated my trust in such a profound and deliberate way. "We were ashamed," he finally admitted. "Ashamed to admit that we had failed, that we couldn't handle our own finances, that we were sinking in debt." "So you preferred to become thieves," I said bitterly. "You preferred to steal from a 67-year-old widow who lives alone on her pension. That was the best solution you could come up with." "You're not just an old woman," Patty intervened, and there was something in her tone that made me look at her more closely. "You own this house, a big house in a good neighborhood. You're worth a lot more than you think, Rosemary." Something about the way she said it chilled me to the bone. "What do you mean by that?" Patty looked at Robert, seeking permission or support. I wasn't sure. He shook his head slightly, but she seemed to ignore him. "This house is worth at least $300,000, Patty said, her words dropping like stones in the silence of the room. "Probably more. And you live here alone, in this huge house with all these empty rooms, while we can barely afford a one-bedroom apartment in the worst part of town." There it was, the complete truth, finally exposed. It wasn't just about the debts. It was about resentment. It was about greed. "So you thought I didn't deserve to live in my own house," I said slowly, processing the magnitude of what I was hearing. "You thought I had too much and you too little. It's not fair." Patty raised her voice, all pretense of remorse disappearing from her face. "We work 60 hours a week and can barely survive, while you sit here alone in this mansion." "This is not a mansion," I replied, my voice trembling. "It's the home that Richard and I built with 40 years of hard work. It's the house we paid for with every dollar we earned, sacrificing vacations, luxuries, everything you can imagine. This house is full of memories of an entire life." Memories don't pay the bills, Patty retorted coldly. Patty, Robert tried to silence her, but she continued. It's the truth, Robert. Your mother is sitting on a fortune while we drown. Why should she have all this when she doesn't even need it? I stood up, facing her directly. Who are you to decide what I need or don't need? Who gave you the right to judge my life? Someone has to tell the truth. Patty crossed her arms defiantly. Robert will never do it because he's too cowardly. But someone has to. You're watching us sink, while you have more than you could use in 2 lifetimes. And your solution was to rob me. My voice rose again. Your big plan was to wait for me to leave to empty my house, to sell everything I own. What was going to happen next? Were you going to sell the house too? Was that in the plan? The silence that followed was more revealing than any confession. Oh my God, I whispered, feeling my legs falter again. You were going to sell my house. That was the final plan, wasn't it? Mum, no. Robert tried to deny it, but his face betrayed him. How? I asked. I needed to understand the depth of this conspiracy. How did you plan to sell my house without my consent? Patty laughed without humor. Robert has limited power of attorney, remember? You gave it to him 2 years ago when you had that surgery and needed someone to handle your affairs while you were recovering. I felt as if the ground opened up beneath my feet. It was true. After my hip surgery, I had given Robert a power of attorney so he could pay my bills and handle urgent matters while I was incapacitated. It was supposed to be temporary. It was supposed to help me. That power of attorney is limited and specific, I said, my mind working quickly despite the shock. It doesn't give you authority to sell my property. But with a corrupt enough lawyer and some falsified documents, Patty smiled maliciously, a lot can be done. Patty, shut up, Robert finally exploded. Just shut up. But it was too late. She had already said too much. The complete plan was now exposed before me in all its horrible clarity. They didn't just want to steal my possessions. They wanted to steal my home, the only place in the world where I felt safe, where I could still feel Richard's presence. Get out, I said with a calm but firm voice. Get out of my house right now. Mum, please, let me explain. Robert tried to approach me again. There is nothing to explain, I interrupted him. I want you out of my house immediately, and I want you to return everything in that truck, now. We can't do that, Patty said coldly. Some of those things we already sold. They no longer exist. Then you will pay me for them, I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. You will pay me every cent of the value of everything you stole, or I will call the police. You'll call the police on your own son? Patty laughed. Don't be ridiculous. You're too weak to do that. Try me. I looked directly into her eyes, and something in my expression must have scared her because she took a step back. Mum, please. Robert was openly sobbing now. We don't want to end up like this. We're family. Family doesn't steal from each other, I replied, feeling every word tear me apart inside. Family doesn't conspire to take everything from one of their own. What you did is not what a family does. It's what strangers, criminals, do. I took out my cell phone from my pocket with trembling hands. Robert saw the gesture and turned even paler. Who are you going to call? He asked fearfully. First, I'm going to call Florence, I said, referring to my neighbor and best friend. She is a witness. I need someone else here to see what you've done. Then I'm going to call a locksmith, because I'm changing all the locks on this house today. And after that, I'm going to call my lawyer. Mum, you can't do this, Robert was pleading now. You'll ruin us. If you call the police, I'll have a record. I won't be able to get a job. You'll destroy us. You destroyed yourselves, I replied, dialing Florence's number. I did nothing except be foolish enough to trust my own son. The phone rang twice before Florence answered. Rosemary, I thought you were on the plane. Florence, I need you to come to my house immediately, I said, my voice breaking slightly. Something has happened. I need a witness. I'm on my way, she replied without asking questions, and I could hear the sound of a door closing on the other end of the line. Florence lived 3 houses down. She'll be here in minutes. I hung up the phone and looked at Robert and Patty. You have 2 options. You can stay here and wait for Florence to arrive, and then we'll call the police together. Or you can start putting everything back into the house from that truck right now. And maybe, just maybe, I will consider not pressing charges. This is blackmail, Patty spat the words. I didn't correct her. This is justice. This is giving you a chance you don't deserve, a chance that I never had when you decided to turn my home into your personal store. Robert looked at the truck parked outside. Then he looked at me. And finally he looked at Patty. I could see the conflict on his face, the internal battle between the son he once was and the man he had become. Okay, Robert finally gave in, his voice barely a defeated whisper. We'll return everything. What? Patty looked at him with disbelief. Robert, you can't be serious. We need that money. We need those things. Enough, Patty. Robert ran his hands over his face, looking exhausted and defeated. This went too far, much farther than it should have gone. I can't believe you're giving up like this. Patty looked at him with contempt. I knew you were weak, but this… I'm not weak, Robert interrupted her, his voice taking on a tone I had never heard before. I'm a thief. I'm someone who betrayed his own mother. That's not strong, Patty. That's being a coward. For the first time since I arrived, I saw some genuine remorse in my son's eyes. But it was too late. The damage was done. The trust was broken. And I wasn't sure it could ever be repaired. Start unloading the things from the truck, I ordered, crossing my arms. Everything, down to the last object. Robert nodded and walked out of the house. Patty followed him, but not before giving me a look filled with pure resentment. I stood in my bedroom, looking at the empty drawer where my most precious treasures used to be, feeling a void in my chest that I knew no returned object could fill. I heard hurried footsteps outside, and then Florence's familiar voice. Rosemary, where are you? In my bedroom, I called out. Florence appeared in the doorway, breathless from running. She was a woman my age, 65, with short grey hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had been my neighbour for 20 years and my best friend for 15. What happened? I thought, oh my God, that's Robert out there. Her eyes widened in surprise upon seeing my son and his wife unloading furniture from the truck. What is going on? I told her everything. Every painful detail, every devastating confession. Florence listened in silence, her expression changing from surprise to disbelief, and finally to indignation. That miserable, ungrateful wretch, she hissed when I finished. After everything you did for him. I don't know what to do, Florence, I admitted, feeling the tears threaten to return. He's my son, my only son. How can I report him? How can I call the police and ruin his life? He ruined his own life, Florence put her hand on my shoulder. And he almost ruined yours too. Rosemary, what they did is serious. It's not just theft. It's premeditated. It's systematic. They've been breaking into your house for months. I know, I whispered. I know all that. But he's still my son. And you're still his mother, Florence replied firmly. A mother who deserves respect, love, and honesty. Not betrayal, not theft, not manipulation. We went downstairs together and walked out to the front of the house. Robert and Patty were unloading the furniture with slow, resentful movements. They had already returned several pieces, but the truck was still half full. "How much more is there?" I asked. "A lot," Robert replied without looking me in the eyes. "It took us all morning to load it." "Then it will take you all afternoon to unload it," I said without a trace of sympathy. "I want every single thing returned to its exact place. Every piece of furniture, every box, every object." Florence stayed with me, a silent but supportive presence. We watched as Robert and Patty worked, sweating under the afternoon sun. The neighbors started to come out, curious about the truck and the unusual activity. I could see the looks, the whispered conversations, the speculations. Mrs. Miller from next door cautiously approached. "Rosemary, is everything okay? I thought you were traveling." "The trip was cancelled," I replied briefly, not wanting to go into detail. "Oh, what a shame. Well, if you need anything." She let the offer hang in the air before retreating, clearly sensing that there was more to the story, but not daring to ask directly. 2 hours passed. The sun was beginning to set on the horizon when the truck was finally empty. I went inside the house to inspect, with Florence following close behind me. The furniture was back, but everything felt different. It was no longer my safe sanctuary. Now it was a place that had been violated, invaded, profaned. "A lot is still missing," I said, looking at the empty spaces that still remained. The jewelry, the watches, the locket, the crystal collection. "We sold them," Robert admitted, entering behind us. "We can't give them back because we don't have them anymore." "Then you will give me a list," I said with a firm voice. "A complete list of everything you sold, where you sold it, when, and for how much. And you will pay me the true value of each object, not the pennies you probably got at the pawn shop." "We don't have that money," Patty protested. "We told you we're broke." "Then you will get the money," I replied coldly. "You will get extra jobs. You will do whatever is necessary. But you will pay me every cent." "And if we can't?" Patty challenged me. "Then I will press charges," I said simply. "I have a witness now." I pointed to Florence. "I have evidence of attempted breaking and entering. I have your confession recorded." I lifted my cell phone and watched as both of them paled upon realizing that I had been recording the entire conversation since Florence arrived. "That's cheating," Patty accused. "No, Patty," Florence intervened with an icy voice. "That's smart. It's protecting yourself from people who clearly have no scruples." Robert sank onto the sofa, looking completely defeated. "How long do we have?" "You have 1 month," I decided in the moment. 1 month to get the money and return the value of everything you stole. If not, I will go to the police with everything I have." "1 month is not enough," Patty protested. "The debts we have total more than $15,000, and that's not counting what we owe you." "That is not my problem," I said, and every word hurt, because I knew I was closing a door, possibly forever. "You had 3 months to steal from me. You have 1 month to compensate me." "You're cruel," Patty spat the words. I didn't correct her. "I'm fair, something you clearly don't understand." I took out my phone again and dialed another number. This time it was the locksmith I had used before when I lost my keys some years ago. "Hello, this is Rosemary Baker. I need to change all the locks on my house, all of them. Can you come today? It's urgent." The locksmith said he could be there in 1 hour. I hung up and looked at Robert and Patty. "You have 1 hour before the locksmith arrives," I said. "After that, you will not be able to enter this house ever again without my explicit permission." "Mom, please." Robert stood up, approaching me with his hands outstretched in supplication. "Don't do this. I'm still your son." A son who stole from me, I replied, feeling my heart break with every word. A son who conspired to take away my home. A son who sold the last gift from my deceased husband for $200 miserable. I was desperate, Robert sobbed. I didn't know what else to do. You could have asked me for help, I repeated for the umpteenth time. You could have come to me with the truth. Yes, I don't have much money, but I would have sold some things myself. I would have gotten a loan. I would have done something. But you took that option away from me. You took away the right then to decide about my own life, about my own possessions. I'm sorry. Robert was openly crying now. I'm so sorry, Mum. I don't know what I was thinking. You were thinking about yourself, I said sadly. Only about yourself. Florence took my arm gently. Rosemary, why don't you sit down? You've had a terrible day. I can supervise until the locksmith arrives. I nodded, feeling suddenly exhausted. The entire weight of the day, of the shock, of the betrayal, fell over me like a giant wave. I sat down in my favorite armchair, the one Richard and I bought together so many years ago, and closed my eyes. I listened to Florence speaking with Robert and Patty in a low but firm voice, making it clear that she would stay there until they left. I listened to the sound of traffic outside, the birds singing in the garden trees, all those everyday sounds that suddenly seemed to belong to another life, to another world where my son was not a thief. When I opened my eyes, the locksmith had already arrived. He was a middle-aged man named Jimenez, who had worked on my house before. He greeted me with a kind smile that faded when he saw my expression and the tense atmosphere in the room. Mrs. Baker, you told me it was urgent, he commented, looking cautiously at Robert and Patty, who were sitting silently at the other end of the room. Yes, I need you to change all the locks, I confirmed, standing up with effort. The front door, the back door, the garage door, all of them. All of them? Jimenez asked, surprised. That's going to cost around $400 with labor. It doesn't matter, I said without hesitation. Do it. I watched Robert wince at the mention of the money. $400 that I would have to spend because I could no longer trust my own son. $400 to feel safe in my own house. Jimenez began working on the front door. The sound of his tools filled the uncomfortable silence that had settled in the house. Florence made coffee in the kitchen without asking permission and brought me a cup with 2 spoons of sugar, just the way I liked it. Drink, she ordered softly. You've had a tremendous shock. I took the cup with trembling hands and drank. The hot liquid comforted me a little, although nothing could truly warm the coldness I felt in my heart. Robert approached again, moving with the caution of someone approaching a wounded animal. Mum, he said. About that power of attorney Patty mentioned. I'll revoke it tomorrow morning. I interrupted him before he could continue. I will go with my lawyer and make sure you don't have any kind of legal authority over my affairs. None. Mum, please, it wasn't my intention to misuse it, he tried to explain. It was Patty who suggested we could. Don't blame your wife, I cut him off again. You made the decision. You entered my house. You stole my things. You sold your father's locket. Those were your decisions, Robert. Yours. But she pressured me, he insisted. She kept saying you were selfish, that you had too much while we suffered. She convinced me that we were doing the right thing. And you believed her? I asked with disbelief. Did you really believe that stealing from your widowed mother was the right thing to do? Robert didn't answer, but his silence was answer enough. Patty stood up abruptly. I'm not going to stand here and listen to you blame me for everything. Robert is an adult. He made his own decisions. You're right, I agreed, surprising her. He is an adult who made terrible decisions. But you encouraged him, you manipulated him, You pushed him to betray his own mother. I didn't manipulate him, Patty protested. I just opened his eyes to reality. The reality that his mother lives like a queen while her son can barely pay the rent. Like a queen, I repeated, feeling the rage bubbling up in my chest again. I live like a queen. I cook my own meals because I can't afford to eat out. I wear the same clothes for years because I can't buy new ones. I clip coupons and wait for sales to buy groceries. That's living like a queen. You have a $300,000 house, Patty retorted. A house that I paid for over 30 years with the sweat of my brow and my husband's, I replied with a trembling voice. A house that I am not going to sell or mortgage because it is the only thing I have left of my life with Richard. It is my home, my sanctuary, my refuge. It's a wasted investment, Patty said coldly. Maybe for you, I said. For me, it's my life. Jimenez finished with the first lock and began with the back door. Every sound of his work was like a nail in the coffin of my relationship with my son. Every new lock was one more barrier between us. And what happens now? Robert asked in a small voice. You just cut us out of your life. I don't know, I admitted honestly. I need time. I need space. I need to process all of this. Time until when? He insisted. A week? A month? A year? I don't know, Robert, I repeated, feeling the weariness down to my bones. I don't have the answers right now. I just know that I can't look at you without feeling this betrayal that is consuming me inside. We're your family, Charles, he said desperately. And you treated me worse than a stranger, I replied. You treated me like a target, like a source of easy money, not like a mother, not like a person. Florence reappeared with more coffee, this time also bringing some water for me. Rosemary, do you want them to leave now? I can ask them to wait outside while the locksmith finishes. I looked at Robert and Patty. My son looked destroyed, his eyes red and swollen from crying so much. Patty looked resentful but defeated, knowing she had lost this battle. Part of me wanted to throw them out immediately, never to see them again. But another part, the part that was still a mother despite everything, wanted to hug him and tell him that everything would be okay. But I couldn't do that. Not yet. Maybe never. They can stay until the locksmith finishes, I finally decided. But after that, I want you to leave. And don't come back without calling first. If you show up here unannounced, I will call the police. You would call the police on your own son? Robert asked with disbelief. After today, I no longer know what you are capable of, I replied with brutal honesty. So yes, I would call the police if necessary to protect myself. Those words seemed to hit him harder than anything else I had said. He sank back onto the sofa, his head in his hands, sobbing silently. Jimenez worked for another hour. He changed 3 locks in total and handed me a complete set of new keys. He also offered to install additional security deadbolts, but I declined. I had spent enough money for one day. Mrs. Baker, if you ever need to change the locks again or have any security issues, don't hesitate to call me, Jimenez said when he finished, putting away his tools. He gave me his card and a compassionate look that suggested he had understood more of the situation than I would have liked. I paid him in cash, money I had saved for emergencies. I never imagined that an emergency would be protecting myself from my own son. After Jimenez left, I turned to Robert and Patty. It's time for you to go. Robert stood up slowly, like a man walking toward his execution. Mum, can I at least give you a hug? Can I at least say goodbye properly? I looked at my son, the child I had raised, the baby I had held in my arms, the teenager I had helped with homework, the young man I had watched marry with hope and love. And I felt nothing. a void where there used to be unconditional love. No, I said simply. Right now, I can't bear for you to touch me. I saw the pain in his eyes, and a small, cruel part of me was glad. I wanted him to feel even a fraction of the pain I was feeling. I understand, Robert whispered. Mum, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything. I know those words mean nothing now, but I'm saying them anyway. You're right, I said with a hollow voice. They mean nothing. Patty didn't say anything. She simply grabbed her purse and walked toward the door. Robert followed her after one last look at me, a look full of regret and despair. Remember what I told you before you leave. You have 1 month. 1 month to get the money and return what you stole from me. If not, I will go to the police with everything. The recording, Florence's testimony, everything. We'll get it, Robert promised, although his voice lacked conviction. And then they left. I heard the sound of their footsteps fading away, the engine of the moving truck starting, the vehicle driving away down the street. And then, for the first time, all day there was silence. Florence closed the door and slid the deadbolt of the new lock. The sound was definitive, final. Rosemary, she said softly, coming to sit next to me. You're okay? No, I admitted. And finally, I allowed the tears to flow freely. I am not okay at all. Florence hugged me while I cried. I cried for the lost innocence, for the broken trust, for the relationship that might never be repaired. I cried for the son I thought I had, and for the man he had truly become. I cried for Richard, wishing he were here, wishing he could tell me what to do. Let it all out, Florence murmured, stroking my hair like a mother would. Cry all you need to. You've earned it. I don't know how long we stayed like that. The sun had completely set when I finally pulled away from her, my eyes swollen and my throat sore from sobbing so much. Florence brought me a tissue and a glass of cold water. Thank you, I whispered, drinking the water slowly. Thank you for being here. I don't know what I would have done without you. You don't have to thank me, Florence replied firmly. That's what friends do. True friends. That word, true, resonated in my mind. True friends. True family. What did those words really mean? I had thought family was sacred, that blood was thicker than water, that a son would always be a son. But today had taught me that family could betray you as deeply as any stranger, maybe more deeply because you trusted them in a way you would never trust anyone else. You need to eat something, Florence said, getting up from the sofa. I bet you haven't eaten all day. She was right. My last meal had been breakfast that morning a lifetime ago, but the idea of eating made my stomach turn. I'm not hungry, I protested weakly. I don't care. Florence was already in the kitchen, opening the refrigerator. You're going to eat, even if I have to shove it in your mouth myself. You've had a tremendous shock, and you need to keep up your strength. She prepared me a simple sandwich and a hot soup she found in the pantry. She forced me to eat while she sat across from me, watching me like a hawk. Every bite was difficult to swallow, but I did it because I knew she was right. I needed to maintain my strength for what would come next. So now what? Florence asked when I finished eating. What's your plan? Tomorrow I'll go see my lawyer, I said, having thought about this during the last few minutes. I need to revoke that power of attorney immediately. After that, I need to make a complete inventory of everything they stole from me and estimate its real value. I can help you with that, Florence offered. I have a good memory for details. I remember a lot of the things you had. Thank you, I said, feeling a wave of gratitude toward this woman who had shown up without asking questions, who had stayed by my side throughout the horrible day. I also need to decide if I'm really going to press charges if they don't pay me. You have doubts? Florence asked with surprise. He's my son, Florence, I sighed. I know what he did. I know he has no excuse. But he's still my son. How do I send my own son to jail? You wouldn't be sending him, Florence replied gently but firmly. He sent himself with his actions. You're just protecting your rights, your property, your safety. I know it in my head, I admitted, but my heart says he's my baby, the child I raised, who I fed, who I cared for when he was sick. That child grew up, Florence said softly. And the man he became made decisions that have consequences. You can't protect him from the consequences of his own actions forever, Rosemary. Sometimes love means letting people face what they've done. Her words made sense, but that didn't make them any easier to accept. Florence stayed with me late that night. We went through every room of the house together, making notes of what had been returned and what was still missing. The list of lost objects was devastating. My mother's jewelry, valued at least $5,000. Richard's antique watches, which had been appraised at $3,000 a few years ago. My grandmother's crystal collection, irreplaceable but probably valued at about $2,000. And the locket, my precious locket, which was priceless to me but which they had sold for $200 miserable. You're looking at a debt of at least $15,000, Florence calculated, reviewing our notes. And that's being conservative with the estimates. Some of these things could be worth much more. They will never have that money, I said with certainty. They already said they have debts of $15,000. How are they going to get another $15,000 in 1 month? Then you will go to the police, Florence said simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Then I will go to the police, I repeated, tasting the words in my mouth. They sounded strange, wrong, as if I were speaking a foreign language. That night, after Florence finally went home, I stayed awake for hours. The house felt different. Every creak made me jump. Every shadow seemed threatening. This place, which had been my sanctuary for decades, now felt like a violated, unsafe space. I got up and checked all the locks 3 times, then 4 times, then 5. I knew it was irrational, that the locks were new and secure, that Robert and Patty no longer had keys. But I couldn't stop. The fear had settled in my bones in a way I couldn't shake. Finally, around 3 o'clock in the morning, I fell asleep on the sofa with all the lights on, unable to bear the idea of sleeping in my bedroom, where much of the confrontation had occurred. I woke up with the sun streaming through the windows and my body sore from sleeping in an uncomfortable position. For a blessed moment, I didn't remember anything. Then everything came flooding back, like a cold wave, and I had to take several deep breaths to keep from crying again. I forced myself to get up, make coffee, and follow a normal routine, even though nothing was normal. I called my lawyer, Gilbert, as soon as his office opened at 9 o'clock in the morning. "Mrs. Baker, what a surprise," he said with his professional but kind voice. "How can I help you?" "I need an urgent appointment," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need to revoke a power of attorney and possibly discuss filing criminal charges." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Criminal charges? Is everything all right?" "No, nothing is all right," I admitted. "But I prefer to discuss it in person." "Can I see you this afternoon at 2 o'clock?" he offered. "Perfect," I accepted. "I'll be there." I spent the next few hours preparing for the meeting. I organized all my notes, the recording of the confrontation with Robert and Patty, the photos I had taken of the moving truck, and the objects being returned. Florence was right about being meticulous with the documentation. If this was going to reach the police, I needed solid evidence. At 1:30, I dressed in my best outfit, one that Richard always said made me look powerful and elegant. I needed to feel powerful today. I needed to feel that I still had control over something in my life. Gilbert's office was downtown, in an old but well-maintained building. I had known him for years. He had handled the sale of our first house, had helped with Richard's will, and had been a constant presence in the important legal moments of my life. His secretary showed me in immediately. Gilbert stood up from his desk when I entered, and his worried expression told me that something in my appearance revealed the trauma I had experienced. "Mrs. Baker, please sit down," he said, pointing to a comfortable chair across from his desk. Are you all right?" "No," I said honestly, sitting down. "I'm not all right, but I need your help to sort this out." And then I told him everything, every painful detail of that horrible day. Gilbert listened without interrupting, taking occasional notes, his expression becoming more serious with each revelation. "This is serious, Mrs. Baker," he said when I finished. "Very serious. We're talking about theft, possible document forgery, conspiracy. Your son could face years in prison." "I know," I whispered. "Why do you think I'm so distraught?" "I understand your conflict," Gilbert said with compassion. "He's your son, but you also need to protect yourself. First, we will revoke that power of attorney immediately. I can prepare the documents today." "Thank you," I said with relief. "Second, we need to decide about the criminal charges," he continued. "You have solid evidence. The recording, your neighbor's testimony, the facts are clear. But once you file the charges, there's no turning back. The legal process will take its course." "I gave them 1 month," I explained. 1 month to return the value of what they stole. Gilbert nodded thoughtfully, folding his hands on his desk. 1 month is reasonable, considering the circumstances. But we need to formalize this. It can't just be a verbal agreement. We need a legal document that clearly sets out the terms. "What kind of document?" I asked, relieved to have someone who knew how to handle this professionally. "I will prepare a restitution agreement," Gilbert explained. "It will detail every stolen item, its estimated value, and the total amount they must return. It will also include a specific deadline, 30 days from signing, and the consequences if they fail to comply, which would be the immediate filing of criminal charges." "They would have to sign it?" I asked. "Yes," he confirmed. "And we'll need them to do it before a notary. That makes it legally binding. If they don't sign, well, that in itself would be an admission that they know they did something wrong and are unwilling to make amends." "And what if they sign but don't pay?" My voice trembled slightly. "Then you have a legal document proving they admitted to the theft and agreed to restitution," Gilbert said firmly. "That makes filing charges much simpler. They would essentially be condemning themselves." I nodded slowly, processing everything. "How long will it take you to prepare that document?" "I can have it ready tomorrow morning," he replied. "I will also include a clause prohibiting any unsolicited contact with you or entry onto your property without your explicit written consent. Basically, a civil restraining order." "Thank you, Gilbert," I said, feeling for the first time since yesterday that someone was on my side, protecting me. "I don't know what I would do without your help." "That's what I'm here for," he replied with a kind smile. "Now, let's talk about the power of attorney. Do you have the original document?" I took the document out of my purse. I had kept it in my safe at home, along with other important papers. Gilbert reviewed it carefully, frowning as he read. "This power of attorney is quite broad," he commented with concern. "More than it should be for a temporary post-surgery power." "Who drafted this?" "A lawyer that Robert recommended," I admitted, feeling a new weight in my stomach. He said he was a friend of his, that he would give us a good price. Mrs. Baker, Gilbert looked at me seriously. This document gives your son authority over virtually all your financial and legal affairs. With this, he could theoretically sell your house, empty your bank accounts, take out loans in your name. Do you realize how dangerous this is? I felt as if I had been punched. But the lawyer said it was standard, that it was what was needed to manage my accounts while I was recovering. He lied to you, Gilbert said bluntly. He was either incompetent or did it intentionally. I suspect it was the latter. Who paid for this service? Robert paid, I remembered. He said it was his gift to me, so I wouldn't have to worry about legal expenses while I was sick. I understand. Gilbert made some additional notes. We need to revoke this immediately, and I also need to investigate that lawyer. Do you remember his name? I gave him the name, and I saw Gilbert's expression darken even more. I know that man, he said with disgust. He has had several complaints before the Bar Association. He works in grey areas. Let's just say I wouldn't be surprised if he intentionally collaborated with your son on this. You mean Robert planned this 2 years ago? The magnitude of the betrayal kept growing. It's possible, Gilbert said carefully. Or perhaps he just wanted to have the option, just in case. Either way, that power of attorney should have been revoked a long time ago. The fact that your son never suggested it is revealing. I left Gilbert's office 2 hours later with a clear plan, but an even heavier heart. The power of attorney would be officially revoked the next day. The restitution agreement would be ready in 48 hours. And if Robert and Patty didn't comply, I would have everything necessary to press charges that could send them to prison. When I got home, I found Florence waiting for me in her yard. She immediately approached me when she saw me get out of the cab. How did it go? She asked with concern. It's handled, I replied wearily. Gilbert is preparing everything. But I found out something worse, Florence. The power of attorney I gave Robert 2 years ago was much broader than it should have been. It basically gave him total control over my financial life. Florence paled. Oh my God, Rosemary. You mean he could have sold my house without my knowledge? Yes, I finished the sentence for her. He could have emptied my accounts. He could have done anything. And the lawyer who drafted the document is known for working in grey areas of the law. Then Robert planned this 2 years ago, Florence said, what we were both thinking. Or at least he made sure he had the necessary tools when the time came. I nodded. I don't know which is worse. That night, I barely slept again. Nightmares tormented me. I dreamed I arrived home and found it completely empty. I dreamed I opened my drawers and everything had disappeared. I dreamed of Robert's face, but it was that of a stranger, someone I had never really known. I woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding. I couldn't go back to sleep. I got up, made coffee, and sat in the kitchen watching the sunrise through the window. My phone rang around 7 o'clock. It was an unknown number. I hesitated before answering, but finally did. Mom? It was Robert's voice, broken and desperate. Please, don't hang up. I should have hung up. I should have ended the call immediately. But something in his voice stopped me. What do you want, Robert? I asked in a tired voice. I need to talk to you, he said quickly, as if afraid I would cut him off at any moment. Please, just give me 5 minutes. 5 minutes to explain something to you. You explained quite a bit the other day, I replied coldly. No, I didn't, he insisted. There are things I didn't tell you, things you need to know. More lies? I asked bitterly. No, the truth. His voice broke. The whole truth. The truth I should have told you months ago. I sighed deeply. Against my better judgment, Against all the warnings in my head, I said, "You have 5 minutes. Talk." I heard him take a deep breath on the other end of the line. "I lost my job 8 months ago. Not 3 months ago, like I told you. 8 months ago, I was laid off due to a company restructuring." My hand gripped the phone tighter. "And why didn't you tell me?" "Shame," he admitted. "Pure shame. You were always so proud of me, of my career, of how well I was doing. I couldn't bear to tell you I had failed." "Losing a job is not failing, Robert," I said, feeling a mixture of frustration and pain. "It's something that happens to people. You could have told me." "I know. I know now." His voice trembled. "But at the time, all I could think about was how I would disappoint you. So I lied. I told you everything was fine, that work was great, that we were doing well financially. Meanwhile, you were sinking in debt," I said, starting to get the complete picture. "Yes," he confirmed. "We used the credit cards to maintain the appearance of normalcy, to pay the rent, to buy groceries, so it would look like everything was fine when I came to visit you. And then the debts grew so much that we couldn't even make the minimum payments. And that's when you decided to rob me," I said, not softening the words. "That's when Patty started talking about you," Robert said. "About how you lived alone in that big house, about how you had all those antique things that were worth money. At first I ignored her, but the debts kept growing. The collectors wouldn't stop calling. We were about to be evicted. And then you decided your mother was the easy solution," I finished for him. "It wasn't like that," he protested weakly. "Or maybe it was. I don't know anymore, Mum. My head was so confused. I was so desperate. Patty kept saying we would just take a few things, things you wouldn't notice right away, just enough to get out of the hole." "And the locket?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Was that just enough to get out of the hole?" Silence on the other end of the line. Then, in a barely audible voice, "We needed to pay the rent, or we were going to be thrown out on the street that very day. The locket was the most valuable thing we could find quickly. Mum, I am so sorry. If I could go back in time." "But you can't," I interrupted him. "You can't go back in time, Robert. You can't undo what you did. You can't give me back the trust you broke." "I know," Robert sobbed on the other end of the line. "I know. And it's killing me. Every time I close my eyes, I see your face, that expression when you discovered us. I had never seen so much pain in your eyes, Mum. And to know that I caused that pain." "Why are you calling me Robert?" I asked, interrupting his monologue of self-pity. "What do you really want?" "I want you to know that Patty and I are separating," he said. And those words took me completely by surprise. "What?" was all I could say. "After we left your house the other day, we had a terrible fight," he explained. "The worst of our marriage. I told her we never should have done what we did, that it was unforgivable. She said I was weak, that I was pathetic for feeling guilty. She said you had more than you needed, and that there was nothing wrong with taking what was due to us." "Due to you?" I repeated with disbelief. "Nothing in my house was due to you, Robert. Nothing in my house belonged to you." "Exactly what I told her," he continued. "And she insisted that we were family, that family shares everything, that your house practically should be ours too. That's when I realized something terrible, Mum." "What?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. "That she never really loved me." His voice completely broke. "She loved me for what I could give her, for the security I provided, for the future possibilities. And when I lost my job and could no longer maintain that image, she started looking for other ways to get what she wanted. And I was stupid and desperate enough to go along with it." I felt a strange mixture of emotions. Part of me wanted to comfort my son, tell him everything would be okay. But another part, the part that was still bleeding from the betrayal, remained cold and distant. "That doesn't excuse what you did," I finally said carefully. "Patty may have suggested the idea, but you made the decision. You entered my house. You took my things. You sold your father's locket." "You're right," he admitted. "And I'm going to make things right, Mum. I got a job yesterday. It's not much. Just a warehouse job, night shift. But it pays $11 an hour. And I also got a second job during the day at a gas station. Between the two jobs, I can make about $2,500 a month." I did quick mental calculations. That's not enough to pay $15,000 in 1 month. "I know," he said with frustration. "I've been thinking about it non-stop. I'm trying to sell my car. I could get about $5,000 for it. And I have some things I can sell. My computer, my guitar, anything of value." "And Patty?" I asked. "Is she contributing to this?" "She left," he said simply. "She packed her things last night and went to live with her sister. She said if I was foolish enough to ruin our lives over a selfish old woman, then she didn't want to be part of it." The phrase, "selfish old woman," hit me like a slap. That's how she saw me. That's how she had probably seen me for years, only I had been too blind to notice. "So you're alone," I observed. "Yes," he confirmed. "But maybe that's what I need. Maybe I've needed to be alone for a long time to discover who I really am, without someone else telling me what to think or what to do." "Robert, I appreciate you calling me and telling me all this," I said carefully. "But that doesn't change the situation. My lawyer is preparing a restitution agreement. You will have to sign it before a notary. And if you can't pay the full amount in 1 month, I will have to press charges." "I understand," he said with a resigned voice. "And I accept it. Whatever you decide to do, Mum, I accept it. I deserve it." "It's not about what you deserve," I replied, feeling the weariness in every word. "It's about protecting myself, ensuring that this never happens again." "It will never happen again," he promised vehemently. "I swear it on Dad's memory. I will never do anything like that again." The mention of Richard cut through me like a knife. "Don't swear on your father," I said with a trembling voice. "Don't bring that man into this. He would be devastated if he knew what you did." "I know," Robert sobbed. "And that's what hurts the most, knowing that I disappointed not only my mother, but also my father's memory." We ended the call shortly after. There wasn't much more to say. Robert promised to be available to sign the agreement when it was ready. I promised nothing. I couldn't promise forgiveness. I couldn't promise a repaired relationship. I could only promise that I would think about everything he had said. 2 days later, Gilbert called me to say that the agreement was ready. Robert came to his office that afternoon, looking haggard and exhausted. He had deep bags under his eyes, as if he hadn't slept in days. He had lost weight. His clothes were loose on him. "Hi, Mum," he said when he saw me, his voice barely a whisper. "Robert," I replied with a brief nod. Gilbert had us sit down and explained the terms of the agreement. Robert listened in silence, nodding occasionally. When Gilbert finished, Robert signed without asking questions, without trying to negotiate. His signature trembled slightly on the paper. "I understand I probably won't be able to pay everything in 1 month," he said after signing. "But I want you to know that I'm going to try with everything I have. And if I can't, I will accept the consequences. I'm not going to run away. I'm not going to hide. I'm going to face what I did." I nodded, not trusting my voice to speak. Seeing him like that, so broken and defeated, broke my heart despite everything. He was still my son. That part was never going to change, no matter what he had done. The following weeks were the hardest of my life. Every day I woke up feeling the weight of the decision I would have to make. Robert called me weekly to report his progress. He had sold his car for $4,000. He had sold his computer, his guitar, his television, everything he had of value. He had gotten a third job on weekends. He was working almost 80 hours a week, barely sleeping. "I've collected $8,000, he informed me in the third week. "I know it's not enough, but I'm trying, Mum. I promise I'm trying." Florence came to visit me every day. She brought me food, forced me to go for walks, and kept me sane. One afternoon, while we were having tea in my living room, she asked me the question I had been avoiding. "What are you going to do when the month is up?" she asked directly. "I don't know," I admitted. "Honestly, I don't know, Florence. I see how hard he's working. I see that he is genuinely repentant. But that doesn't change what he did." "No, it doesn't change it," Florence agreed. "But you have to decide what is more important to you, justice or family." "Why can't I have both?" I asked with frustration. "Maybe you can," Florence said thoughtfully, "but probably not in the way you expect. Justice doesn't always come from the courts, Rosemary. Sometimes it comes in other ways." Her words gave me a lot to think about. I spent the nights awake, wrestling with my conscience. I thought about Richard. What would he advise me to do? He had always been softer than me, more forgiving, but he had also been firm about boundaries and consequences. One week before the deadline expired, Robert appeared at my door. He had called first, asking permission to visit. When I opened the door, I barely recognized him. He had lost at least 15 pounds. His face was gaunt, with deep lines of fatigue and stress. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. He entered cautiously, like a frightened animal. He sat down on the edge of the sofa, his hands clasped between his knees. "I have $10,000, he said without preamble. "I know it's not enough. I'm missing 5,000. I've tried everything, Mum. I've worked until I thought I would collapse. I've sold everything I owned. I even tried to get a loan, but without a stable job and with my credit history ruined, no bank would give me anything." "Robert," I began, but he raised his hand. "Let me finish, please," he pleaded. "I know the agreement says that if I don't pay the full amount, you will press charges. And I understand that. I accept it. But before you do, I need to tell you something." "I'm listening," I said softly. "These last 30 days have been the worst of my life," he began, his voice trembling. "But they have also been the most revealing. Working all those jobs, living alone, having time to think about what I did, about who I had become. I realized something, Mum." "What?" I asked. "I realized that I lost my way a long time ago," Robert continued, tears running down his cheeks. "Dad died, and I didn't know how to handle it. Instead of talking to you, instead of processing my pain, I just buried it. I focused on work, on pretending everything was fine, on being the strong man I thought I should be." I felt my own throat close up. We hadn't really talked about Richard's death, not the way we should have. We had both suffered in silence, each trying to protect the other. "And then I met Patty," he continued. "And she was so confident, so determined. She made me feel like I could be strong again. But what I was really doing was letting someone else make decisions for me, letting someone else tell me who I should be." "Robert, we all make mistakes in relationships," I said softly. "That doesn't justify—" "I know," he interrupted me. "I'm not trying to justify anything. I'm just trying to explain how I got to the point where I thought stealing from my own mother was an acceptable option. I had lost my moral compass, Mom. I had lost sight of who I really was. He wiped his tears with the back of his hand, a gesture so familiar from when he was a child that I felt a sharp pain in my chest. These 30 days of working non-stop, living with almost nothing, facing what I did, it was like waking up from a nightmare, he said. And I realized something else. I realized that what I regret most is not that you discovered me. It's that I did it in the first place. It's that I betrayed everything Dad taught me, everything you taught me about honesty and integrity. What do you expect me to do with this, Robert? I asked, my voice breaking. What do you expect me to say? Nothing, he replied, surprising me. I don't expect your forgiveness. I don't expect you to forget what I did. I just wanted you to know that these 30 days changed my life. They taught me who I never want to be again, and regardless of what you decide to do, whether you press charges or not, I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be the man Dad would have wanted me to be. We stayed in silence for a long moment. I could hear the wall clock, the same clock that Richard and I had bought on our trip to Europe 25 years ago. Each tick-tock seemed to mark the weight of the decision I had to make. Do you still have the $10,000? I finally asked. Robert nodded, taking a thick envelope from his jacket. It's all here, in cash, as the agreement specified. I took the envelope, feeling its weight in my hands. $10,000. 30 days of exhausting work, of sacrifice, of facing consequences. It wasn't the full amount, but it was evidence of a genuine effort. I'm going to keep this, I said, and I saw his shoulders slump with relief. But I am not going to press charges. Not yet. Mom. His voice was full of cautious hope. Listen to me carefully, Robert, I said firmly. I am not forgiving what you did. I'm not saying everything is okay. I'm saying that I see your effort. I see your genuine remorse. And I believe that sending you to jail is not going to repair our relationship or give me back what I lost. Then what? He began to ask. The remaining $5,000, I continued. You will pay it back with time. With time? He asked, confused. Once a month, I explained, an idea forming as I spoke. You will come to my house. You will help me with the things I need, repairs, yard work, whatever it is. And we will talk, really talk, not just superficialities. We will talk about your father, about your pain, about how to rebuild trust. I saw the surprise on his face. You're giving me another chance. I'm giving you the opportunity to earn one, I corrected. But understand this clearly. The locks remain changed. You will not have keys to this house ever again. If you want to visit me, you will call first. If I need help, I will call you. But you will never enter my house uninvited again. Understood? Understood, he nodded vigorously. Mum, I promise I won't disappoint you again. I hope so, I said, feeling the weight of years fall off my shoulders. Because this is your last chance, Robert. If you betray my trust again in any way, there will be no more conversations. I will press charges immediately. I won't do it, he promised. I swear it on Dad's memory, on everything sacred. I will not fail you again. This time, when he mentioned Richard, it didn't hurt as much, because I could imagine my husband approving of this decision. He always believed in second chances. He always believed in redemption. But he also believed in consequences and clear boundaries. Robert stayed for a little longer. We had coffee together, something we hadn't done in months. The conversation was awkward at first, full of pauses and tense silences. But gradually, we started talking about real things. He talked about how hard it had been to lose his father, about how he had felt he had to be strong for me when he was actually broken too. I talked about my own loneliness, about how every day in this big house reminded me of what I had lost. "We should have had these conversations 5 years ago," I finally said. "Yes," he said. "Better late than never." When he left that night, I hugged him for the first time since the day of the confrontation. It wasn't like before. There wasn't that warmth and unconditional trust. But it was a start, a small step towards something that maybe, with time and effort, could heal. Florence came to visit me the next day, curious to know what I had decided. "I'm not going to press charges," I told her. "At least not now." "Are you sure?" she asked, studying my face carefully. "No," I admitted honestly. "I'm not sure of anything, but I am sure that sending my son to jail won't give me back what I lost. It won't give me back Richard's locket. It won't give me back the trust. It would only add more pain to an already painful situation." "You're stronger than you think," Florence said, taking my hand. "And wiser." "I don't feel wise," I sighed. "I feel tired." "Forgiveness is tiring," Florence observed. "But resentment is more tiring, and resentment lasts longer." She was right, as always. In the weeks that followed, Robert kept his word. He called before every visit. He came once a week to help with chores around the house. He repaired the garden fence that had been broken for months. He cleaned the gutters. He painted the guest bedroom that had been needing a new coat of paint for years. And we talked. We talked about Richard, about the good times and the difficult ones. We talked about his childhood, about the memories we shared. Slowly, very slowly, we began to rebuild something. It wasn't what we had before. That was lost forever. But it was something new, something built on honesty and clear boundaries instead of assumptions and blind trust. Months later, as I sat in my living room one quiet afternoon, I realized that the house felt different. It no longer felt violated or unsafe. It felt like my home again, but a home I now protected with greater care. The new locks were not just metal and mechanisms. They were symbols of healthy boundaries, of necessary protection. I thought about everything I had lost: my mother's jewelry, Richard's watches, the precious locket. I would never get them back. That pain would always remain. But I had also gained something. I had gained the knowledge of my own strength. I had learned that love does not mean allowing yourself to be hurt. I had learned that forgiving does not mean forgetting or pretending that nothing happened. I got up and walked to the front door, running my hand over the new lock. I remembered the words Florence had said months ago, words that now resonated with deep truth in my heart. "Not every closed door is rancor," I whispered to myself. "Some are protection." I closed my eyes and could feel Richard's presence around me, in every corner of this house we built together. And I knew, with a deep certainty, that he would be proud of me. Not for forgiving our son, necessarily, but for protecting myself first, for setting boundaries, for knowing that true love includes respect, and respect requires boundaries. Outside, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. It was the end of a day, but also the beginning of something new. A new way of living, more cautious perhaps, but also more conscious, stronger, more mine. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace.